Welcome to the Find the Way podcast. In this show, we will try to explore what is happening in emerging markets and how entrepreneurs, investors, and communities are simply finding the way to make phenomenal things happen, regardless how volatile the environment may sometimes seem.
And so you mentioned that I heard very quickly when I was fixing my microphone that originally from Australia, now living in Ciudad de Mexico.
Yeah.
And how did you end up there?
So I came to Mexico in 2000 to work. I was working in the energy sector. So the company that I was working for asked me to come down to Mexico and head up the office for them. So that's how I ended up here. And then I met my husband. And as I say, the rest is history.
The rest is history. And for Justin, you are based in Ecuador, in Quito, and we met briefly in Santa Cruz in Bolivia in August. And can you share a little bit to Bautista as well? Like, how did you end up in Ecuador? Originally from the U.S. and then now living
Please
in
do.
Ecuador.
That's a change.
Yeah, so I've been living in Quito for about 5 years now. I ended up being attracted to Latin America as I was in sort of the process of transitioning my career from the traditional finance world to really interested in getting into impact investing and supporting entrepreneurs in the developing world. I spent some time in West Africa and I was interested in what was going on in the ecosystem in Latin America and ended up in Ecuador through IMPAQTO. Met Daniela and Michelle, the co-founders of IMPAQTO, loved what they were doing. They gave me a job offer. And I moved to Quito and have been here ever since.
How long have you been living in Ecuador?
About 5 years.
5 years. So it's not that bad. Otherwise, you would have left already. So you must somewhat like what you're doing.
Well, you've made it to Ecuador on your world visits, right?
Not yet. Actually, this is one of the only countries in Latin America that I have not really explored yet. I still need to come.
Well, yeah, we're waiting when you come to visit. And Ecuador is a beautiful country, and there's a lot of interesting things going on, and a thriving ecosystem. So I was very happy here.
Absolutely, absolutely. But hey, it's great to have you both in the show today. You know, you've been spending quite a bit of time and your expertise within the field is going to be super, super fascinating. I think that this topic is becoming extremely relevant to what we're going to talk today, especially because you're a very guided impact fund that you are managing. And now in our exploration of Latin America in the past little bit over a year, we have seen a big transition now that everybody seems to be talking about that they are impact investors. I don't know what has happened. Has it been that in a way that the traditional VCs in the region have been returning worse to their LPs than expected? And now, in order to keep their jobs, everybody's transitioning to become an impact fund. So in this sense, I think it's going to be super cool to talk to you on this matter is that what do you see as impact overall? Because now it's all around the world. It's overhyped. It creates crazy amounts of confusion. And now all the LPs that we're looking and talking to who are investing in the fund managers of Latin America, they are also confused that how do people differentiate? Everybody is coming with the narrative of, hey, we're generating the positive impact. So I think that this would be a natural starting point to go into this question to you is that what is impact for you? And you are utilizing financial vehicles to generate impact and what that is in the region. If Anna, if you would be able to start a little bit and then we go for Justin. So what is impact for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, great question. And I think that, what is impact is something that is very personal. And so when people are looking at, generating impact, they need to think, okay, what is that impact they want to generate? Because any investment has impact. It might be positive or negative. So at the fund that I started is called Amplfica. So in our, have our first fund. And for us at Amplfica, our primary impact is gender. So what we're looking to do is to increase the participation of women in venture capital in Latin America, both as investors and as entrepreneurs, people that we finance. And that's what's our main driver. Beyond that, we do analyze the impact that each of our portfolio company has, and we looked that they be, aligned with the sustainable development goals. And we also use methodology from the impact management project to analyze impact. But our primary impact is, increase the participation of women. And what we are looking to, and our message is that we don't see returns and impact as being trade-offs. We look to, as our businesses grow and they produce better financial returns, their impact will also increase. And so I found that really interesting, the comment you made, Eric, that you're seeing, in Latin America, everyone call themselves impact funds. And is that because, it didn't return, good enough returns? And so that they're now saying, okay, we'll call ourselves an impact fund. I don't see that trend. I've actually seen that, the other way around. Some funds that started off as impact funds and couldn't, generate the returns that they and their investors were expecting, and so tried to, pivot to be more mainstream. There's a lot of controversy around, what is impact, the wording around that. So it's great that you're using this call to dig in more to that.
Adding on to what Hannah was saying, maybe starting with what's going on in the ecosystem. And I definitely agree with you, Eric, that you're hearing the word impact a lot more from all different types of investors. And I don't think anything's actually changed. I think what's changed is it's a narrative change in how investors are choosing to describe what they're doing. So if you look at the reality of the Latin America startup and venture capital market, there's a lot of impact inherent to the problems being solved. In the end, entrepreneurs are solving problems, and a lot of the large problems that exist in Latin America are problems of basic services and access to finance and things like that. You look at the top sectors that receive investment in Latin America. FinTech, financial inclusion, is a huge theme and a huge need in Latin America. Health tech is one of the top sectors. Climate tech and ag tech are two of the fastest growing sectors, which inherently also generate impact. And so the reality of what the problems the Latin American startups are solving is impactful. We could probably have a separate debate whether what venture capital is funding in the U.S. and AI and what the impact is of that, and that's less relevant. But the middle class and the problems at the base of the pyramid are what a lot of startups in Latin America are solving. So I think what's happening is that traditional venture capital investors are starting to adopt some of the narrative of impact, not necessarily changing what they're doing. I think that's positive. That we're all realizing that there's impact in the ecosystem. Specifically for us, so I'm managing partner of IMPAQTO Capital, together with my partner Michelle Carpenter. We co-founded IMPAQTO Capital. We're an impact fund, and we have a specific definition of impact. And as Anna said, there's a lot of different definitions of impact. We're looking for companies that are benefiting vulnerable communities in some way through their business models. And that's kind of on the social impact side. Most of the time, vulnerable communities mean base of the pyramid populations, but it could be other vulnerable communities. And then we also include environmental impact as one of the impacts that we're looking for, and that's companies that are solving climate change or contributing to avoiding climate problems and other things like that. And so that's where we're particularly focused in this impact world.
And do you have any specific examples on that, Justin? Is that, for instance, on the social impact that you're looking for? What type of companies are what are they doing in terms of social impact? What have you been sourcing, and what type of deals have you been investigating a little deeper?
Sure, I'm happy to give examples. A great example from our portfolio is a company called Vibrasso. They're based in Colombia, and they're focused on providing internet to poor urban communities where the traditional internet providers aren't providing access. So they're providing them with the top reliable service, fiber optic internet to the home, which is much cheaper and has much higher limits than using internet on their phone, and allowing these poor families to have access to internet and with no contracts and pay-as-you-go flexible plans, which match also the variability of income that poor populations tend to have, has an amazing impact in terms of allowing their children to be able to do their homework, allowing adults to be able to work remotely, and all the other things that the connectivity provides us. So that's a great example of a company providing basic services to a vulnerable community and generating an impact through that, and also is a very solid business that's scalable as well, which I think is important. That when we talk about impact investing, we're talking about impact that's directly tied to a scalable, profitable business.
I think here, Justin, what you mentioned is very clarifying, because some people, when they look at impact investing, especially when they don't know anything about it, they think it's mostly charity work. But clearly it's not. I mean, you're putting your money there because you think that it's aligned with returns, or even greater returns than usually. Is that the case?
Yeah, definitely. If you look at the impact investing sector, that people talk about a spectrum of impact and return, and there are funds that are intentionally sacrificing return to invest in companies that otherwise wouldn't be able to get investment because they're higher risk for whatever reason. And those funds and their investors are very conscious about what that sacrifice is and how they're focusing on, in that case, prioritizing impact over return. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum, and where a lot of us who are more in the impact startup space are playing, is we see impact and return, that we don't see a trade-off between impact and return. We think that solving problems that are inherently impactful in Latin America is a huge business opportunity.
And then for both of you guys, is that I believe your LPs are giving you money based on this impact that you are generating with these theses. How are you measuring this impact? Do you have any specific methods, metrics that you're using? How are you going around it?
So sure. We use two different frameworks. We look at different metrics aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. And so we measure that for the different metrics for each portfolio companies. And then we also use the impact management project framework to measure impact. So we do that at the portfolio company level, and we also do it at the fund level. So that's important for us. But so I think, when we think about impact, I think something that's very important is the measurement. And so when you think of investing in Latin America, I think, Justin is spot on. He's, investing in startups in Latin America. It's inherently impactful because of the problems that we are all seeking to solve. And I would say that probably the difference between, a lot of the other funds out there than the funds that, Justin and I are involved in, is the fact that we actually, intentionally measure that impact rather than, just have it through the investing.
Yeah. And Anna, are you able to give a little bit, just on a fund level, you talk about frameworks that you're utilizing on a portfolio from your portfolio companies, how to measure impact. Can you give a little example, like more clarifying examples? What does that measurement look like? What are the variables that you're looking into on a fund level for you that how do you measure that? Can you just clarify a little bit to the audience?
Yeah, sure. So from a fund level, it's very, basic. Our focus is investing in women. So, it's the first thing we look for when we invest in companies is to have women as founders. So, that's either there are or they aren't. So that's one thing that we measure. Do we have female entrepreneurs on the cap table? And then beyond that, we look, do the companies actually serve the needs of women? So in our portfolio now, we have 18 investments, and 18 of those companies have female founders. Sorry, 17 of them have female founders. One does not, but it still meets with our gender thesis, because that particular company is focused on sexual health, and 80% of their clients are women and 90% of their workforce of women. So we go, when we think about the impact on gender, we look at it at different kinds of levels. We also look at the supply chain of the fund, our service providers, for example, when we were looking for law firms, would work with law firms where they have also female partners. So we want to be consistent throughout our supply chain, and it's something that we ask our providers, those kind of things. So that's at a fund level. And then at a portfolio company level, to be more specific, each of the sustainable development goals has different, criteria and measurement points. So every portfolio company, we talk with a portfolio company, okay, you may contribute to the various sustainable development goals, but which one is the one you most identify with, and what data are you collecting? Sometimes they're, collecting many indicators. Sometimes they're collecting none. We help to make sure they're collecting, at least one per portfolio company. So that's something that's quite, simple to measure. And then the impact management project, uses a different framework. It talks about, avoiding harm, contributing to solutions. So it's got an ABC framework, which also, is quite useful for us when we look at the whole portfolio and how does it contribute to driving positive impact.
Absolutely. And over there, are you both, Justin and Anna, requiring your portfolio companies to update this on a quarterly basis or whatnot, that you're able to get this good dashboard overview of what type of impact they're generating? Or how do you keep track on this?
Yeah, we require our portfolio companies to report quarterly, like any fund does in terms of business metrics. And along with that, we have them report the impact metrics. They're reporting those quarterly. There's certain metrics that are harder to measure quarterly, and in that case, we have them report those particular metrics annually. We generally have each company report between 2 and 5 impact metrics that we work with them to establish at the time that we make the investment.
Yeah, for you the same thing, or does it deviate?
Yes. Yeah, very similar, yes.
Very similar. And then overall, like here, how do you see then impact investing in Latin America overall? Because if we look at folks, I'm originally from Finland, Northern Europe, has been spending most of my time before I started my Latin American exploration journey in the Western world, so to speak. And a lot of folks, when they look at emerging markets, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, a lot of people think that every investment that they funnel into the region can be considered as impact investing. These are family offices, angels, larger institutions, etc., etc. How do you see this? You have been operating in the game within Latin America for quite a while. Is it all impact, or what do you think about this?
I think it's a challenging question because there are different impact frameworks can be used. I would say not all investment is impact. Not all investment has positive, net positive impact. And I also think that actually a lot of the investors who are investing in Latin America do not consider themselves to be impact. I would say most investors do not. When the investors that I speak to, as Justin mentioned, the narrative has been changing, and I think it's something that has to be analysed on a case by case basis. There are very large infrastructure projects, for example, and on the one hand, they're connecting communities, they are enhancing, productivity, they are providing employment opportunities through this connectivity. But on the other hand, they're causing great environmental destruction. So everything has to be looked at very carefully, and I don't think that's a way to say that everything can be impact or not impact. I think it's quite complex.
Yeah, I think the Global Impact Investing Network, which is a nonprofit that sort of oversees, collects a lot of the data around impact investing globally and kind of some of the definitions. and they have some certain definitions around what makes an impact investment an impact investment. And it's not just that the company or the asset that is invested in is generating a positive impact. There's two topics that we've already touched on. One is intentionality, meaning that you're intentionally investing in that company because it generates impact, and that's one of your criteria. And then the other is measurement. And if there's not some amount of some measurement going on, it can be very basic measurement, one impact metric. But if there's not measurement required around that investment, if a fund is not reporting impact metrics to its LPs, it's not a true impact fund. So I think those are key elements to take into account. And I think there's also direct and indirect impact. And so there's a lot of startups that are making industries more efficient, and that has a positive knock-on effects for the entire Latin American economy. But they probably wouldn't fit with our impact criteria because we are looking for companies that are directly benefiting poor, vulnerable communities or poorer populations. So I have interesting conversations with entrepreneurs whose users are mostly upper middle class people, and they say, "Well, I'm having an amazing positive impact on the industry and on my users," and that's true. And I would never say that they are not generating a positive impact. But our criteria for IMPAQTO Capital specifically is that we're looking for impact being generated in a certain population in poorer communities, and so a company like that wouldn't fit our impact framework.
And a question for both of you guys here as well is just to understand how far does it go. So imagine you invest now in a company that fulfills your criteria, but after a year they need a follow-on investment. Their returns are not as you expected, but they're still complying with this criteria, or even more so than they did before. Would they receive a follow-on investment, or is their performance defining factor as well?
Just a quick, like a little follow on this is that you have both your impact measurement variables that you're tracking on a quarterly or an annual basis. If those are top notch, going off the charts, but at the same time the financial KPIs are not quite on par, is that going to be a problem for your follow on runs?
So what we're looking to is to generate excellent returns for our investors. Our thesis is that, investing in women will allow us to generate excellent returns. And so we're not going to invest in a company or do a follow-on if the company's not meeting their financial objectives just because they are generating excellent impact. We need to have them doing both. That's our investment mandate.
We see the world similar way, and I think it's important to remember that the logic around impact investing is that investing in companies that are generating impact that's directly linked to their business model and scales with their business is really can make amazing changes in the world. And so if a company is generating really good impact but not growing, their impact isn't growing either. Not just a financial consideration, it's an impact consideration. So the companies that are able to scale the most with that impact that's directly tied to their business model and their revenue, those are the companies that are going to be the most impactful as well. So there's really actually alignment between the impact objectives and the financial objectives in that sense.
True in that, but the counter argument goes into that one of the greatest hailed company in Latin America, Rappi from Colombia, is that, well, they argue that the impact that they have generated in terms of providing that little beacon of light for becoming an entrepreneur, providing a lot of jobs into people, et cetera, the impact has been tremendous on those metrics. But then the financial returns for everybody who joined pretty much on this round seed and beyond have been losing money. I don't think they will ever make money. Don't take my word on this, but the reality is that maybe if you did not make a secondary exit as a founder or like very early angel, most of the investors are losing money on that case. And that has been hailed as the number one remarkable company in Latin America. So on this sense is ways that, yes, they keep providing employment, they keep providing hope. A lot of people are creating these Rappi mafias. Yes, entrepreneurship grows. The impact is going to be fantastic for the region, but the investors are losing money. It's as simple as that. So in that sense, is a very, very intriguing topic overall, that sometimes you can generate a humongous impact, but at the same time, the investors are losing money. What are your thoughts on that? And do you see this happening in Latin America overall? Like, and your portfolio companies, how are they now in trouble? Are they in trouble because of the funding landscape has changed quite a bit in the whole world, but especially in Latin America? It's everything has basically dried up. A lot of the funds who have been investing and been very active investors in the region, they simply have no money to invest in on follow-on rounds. What are you seeing on this?
Well, Eric, you've asked a lot of questions in that one question there. So, I mean,
I know
look, I
it's
think,
like overall.
I think what's true about, venture is it's, inherently, risky industry. It's a risky investment. But so we see some, portfolio companies, some players in the region doing really, really well, and they've made a lot of money for their investors. And, obviously a lot of them are not going to do so well. So, that's kind of the nature of the
Yeah.
industry, and the power law
game.
dynamics. And what I have seen in the current environment, that funding is starting to pick up. We're seeing more and more activity. Q4 has been a lot more active than what I had expected, and a lot more active than Q3. We are seeing, our portfolio companies, the ones that have strong metrics and growth, have been able to raise capital successfully this year. And obviously, any portfolio you have a mix of performance, and so some are not doing so well, and some are doing really well. What you could expect across any portfolio, but I don't see a doom and gloom scenario. We do see things picking up and more capital becoming available, precisely because there are great opportunities out there.
So there is hope.
I mean, and I mean,
Yeah.
we know that any economy goes through cycles, and we've been going through a cycle, and what goes up has to come down at some point. And now we're seeing things, correct back to more the normality.
I think I would maybe first comment on your first reflection. I think you have to remember impact investing is investing. And the definition of impact investing is looking for a financial return and generating impact. That and is key. It's not or, it's and. And so impact investors follow the same logic as any other investor from that sense, and on the financial side, with the additional impact criteria. And so your argument is fair, and go talk to grant funder. I mean, grant funder and philanthropy by definition is not looking for a financial return. They're looking to generate impact. And so if the narrative is kind of the narrative you laid out, there's an investment opportunity, but there's a company you won't make money investing in it, but it's going to generate an impact, then there's a type of capital that exists for that, and that's grant funding and philanthropy. But impact investing is looking for a financial return and an impact return. So I think that's that's how I would view that first part. On the second point, kind of what we're seeing in the environment, I think one important distinction, we're a little bit different from other funds. We're not equity investors. We invest through revenue-based financing, which means we provide flexible, non-dilutive capital to companies where they're paying back based on a % of revenue that allows them to scale the payments as the company scales. And so we're big believers that venture capital is a solution for a very specific type of company. And I think we saw in 2021 and beginning of 2022, a lot of companies raising VC funding that probably shouldn't have. And those are a lot of the companies that are in trouble because both on the investor side and the founder side, there was a little bit lost in terms of what kind of company should be raising VC and what kind of company should be looking for other types of capital. And so we think that there needs to be a lot more options for different types of capital for startups, and then at startup, the founders ask themselves the question, what type of capital should I be raising? Am I a good fit for VC? And I think that's the first step, and that can help to avoid a lot of the problems that we've seen over the past couple of years in terms of companies that probably shouldn't have raised VC funding, raising VC funding. Those are a lot of the companies that are in trouble.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then if we take a look at over here, again on Latin American market, you have been talking about a little bit today about social and environmental impact. Um, what would you say that do you have more of the other? Do you have more social impact opportunities or environmental impact opportunities, investment opportunities?
So I would say in our portfolio, generally we see more opportunities on the social side, although, we actively look on the environmental side as well. I spent 20 years working in the energy sector, so, have a very
Yeah.
interest in, clean tech and that space. We have various portfolio companies that we see as, um, positive environmental impact, and they have been mostly actually in the agricultural food tech space. But it is a space that we're
Mm,
actively looking at. And I think that in the future, we'll see more and more in the space because we're getting more interest from investors in the space and also, the challenges that we're all seeing with climate change. And given the, diverse uh, ecosystems that are present in Latin America is something very, very important for, the environment
yeah.
In Mexico throughout Latin America. So we expect to see more deal flow in that area.
I agree with Anna. I think there's more opportunities right now in social impact side. Just looking this week at the LAVCA, the Latin American Venture Capital Association, released some of the top 10 sectors receiving investment over the last few years, and climate tech only entered the top 10 in 2022, and 2023 I think it was number 5, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of the fifth sector with most capital invested. So if we just look across Latin America, there's a lot of growth in climate tech and companies that are solving environmental problems. Ag tech is also one of the fastest growing sectors, and there's a lot of times in agriculture, there's both a social impact opportunity because a lot of the poorest people in Latin America are smallholder farmers, and environmental opportunity just because of the amount of land that's used for agriculture, water use, et cetera. And so I think there'll be increasing pipeline on the environmental side over time.
And over there on over time about the environmental and climate change overall, is it more? Are you expecting more of a climate change mitigation or adaptation type of opportunities?
I think there's both. I think we're seeing both. We're Because we invest across multiple sectors. We are seeing opportunities, a lot of opportunities on all different fronts, but we're seeing more and more companies addressing climate change, both in terms of adaptation and mitigation.
Yeah. Same for you, Anna, or
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you see, I'll give you an example of one of the companies we invested in. It's a company called Compound Foods. The entrepreneur is from Costa Rica, and she has developed a coffee alternative. So it's a beanless coffee. So you could see
Mhm.
that both as adaptation and mitigation, because to the extent, you know, due to climate change, there's, less and less community land available for the production of coffee. But also the production of coffee, is quite, intensive in the use of land and water. So, you can also see that as mitigation. That's, one of the companies we've invested in. We've also invested in others that are developing, alternative protein sources and things that I would see, is more, it's a combination of mitigation and adaptation. We've invested in supply chain risk management companies, and that is very much adaptation. The world's changing, and we need to understand how we can mitigate risk, because of that. So we're seeing, it very much on both sides.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, especially now towards Anna, for you, I think Justin, you can contribute to be in Latin America for a long enough time, but your main theme about investing in women entrepreneurs, I think this is an absolutely fascinating question. And if I kind of reflect a little bit over here, is that when I entered in Latin America, I grew up in a Nordic bubble called Finland, where equality is has been on a very, very great level. It has been extremely shocking to travel throughout Latin America and see the big difference, even still today, in terms of how society expects men and women to behave. And I think this can pose challenges to find female entrepreneurs. Like in more developed societies, you see not enough women entrepreneurs in tech, especially, but you still more and more compared to Latin America. And overall here, if I continue a little bit on this reflection, is that it is very, very odd to see that still men today, even younger generation, do not necessarily expect women to enter the labor force at the same level. At least for time being, yes, for certain roles, but still, it is culturally still very acceptable to have people at homes. And that is a very different opinion for me, or like a view for me that I've never really known back in Finland as stay-home moms. And here is still very, very present. So Anna, like overall these things, how do you see investing in women in Latin America? There is not as many female-led companies, especially in the tech sector, neither in the corporate sector. How is the landscape? I think a lot of the audience, especially in more developed countries, would love to hear this because it's a very people don't really talk about it that much, even though it's very widely different.
Yeah, no, it definitely is different. I think I was inspired to build Amplfica based on what I'd seen in other countries, like the US, mostly the US, seeing so many funds focused on women, but not just women as entrepreneurs, women as investors. And the drive for me has really been understanding that if we don't have women investing, we can't develop the technology that women need. We won't develop the technology that reflects the voice, the values, and the needs of women. And I'll give you an example that's very clear to me. When you think about women's health, and you think about sexual health, we see billboards and advertising everywhere talking about Viagra and other drugs for erectile dysfunction, but there's no discussion about the women's sexual health needs, and that's just one small example, but it's very evident that the investment doesn't go there, the discussion isn't there. And so I think it's very important to drive more dollars into, to technology that serves women. And if we don't have female investors, it's very hard to get that to happen. But then when you drill down to the situation in Latin America, we often get this question, does it make sense to have a fund focus on women? Will you have enough pipeline? Well, the industry out there is large. There's a lot of deal flow out there, and we're not looking to invest, in every deal. We typically see around 20 deals per week. That's either inflow or inbound or outbound. So either they come to us or we identify them. And so we're investing in around 5% of the deal flow that we see. So we have, plenty of investment opportunities, but we work hard at it. We go out there and we go to demo days. We look we look for connections. We actively seek out female entrepreneurs. But that's part of our job as investors. So I often, go to events and people say to me, "Oh, Anna, we just can't find any female entrepreneurs." And I think just like it's more challenging for female entrepreneurs because of the society we live in, the historical, cultural, societal norms. Yeah, it is more challenging for women to be entrepreneurs, and it is more challenging for us as investors to, to get out and identify them all. But it's part of our job. It's part of our, our work. So I think as
Yeah.
society as a whole, both men and women, if we want to get more women actively engaged and having influence, we all need to work together to make sure that happens.
And I mean, I think completely agree with everything Anna said. I mean, maybe adding a couple things. One is I think the reality of Latin America is that many of us who were not just investors, were ecosystem builders, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done in building up the ecosystem, whether that be, regionally focused, or focused on female founders or focused on a particular sector. But you see a lot of funds that do a lot of ecosystem building work. And Anna and the Amplfica team have done a lot of work in building up, having open pitch listening and feedback sessions for any female entrepreneur in Latin America, highlighting, female-led startups that they're not necessarily invested in, and social media, and kind of this building up the awareness of the issue. And I think we can all, contribute to that. IMPAQTO Capital, we invest with a gender lens, which means we don't exclusively invest in female-led startups, but we're looking, that's part of our criteria and what we're evaluating, working with companies to improve both at the leadership level, in terms of employees and in terms of the beneficiaries and the customers. And then I think the other point that we can't forget is that while Latin America might have unique cultural and societal challenges that the developed world doesn't have, if I'm not mistaken, in the US, the most developed venture capital market in the world, 2% of venture capital goes to startups that have all female founding teams. So it's not as if the developed world is doing particularly well in venture capital industry and in gender equality. So I think it's a challenge globally, not just in Latin America.
Absolutely. And how do you see that? Well, you are paving the way for these opportunities to exist, for female founders, female-led companies to even exist and have an opportunity to test their products in the market. Have you seen now, Anna? You've been since 2000, early 2000s here, over 2 decades, and Justin for 5 years. Are the times changing, or what's going on?
Okay. I mean, look, I would say the times are changing, but it's very, very slow. I mean, one of the things that, was a kind of a call to action for me to start this fund was hearing Melinda French Gates, repeat the information that's been published by the World Economic Forum in terms of, okay, how many years is it going to take to reach gender parity? And in the US, that number back in 2018 was around 250 years. That's the US. So Justin highlighted some key issues that you see worldwide, and we've still got a long way to go. And I do see things progressing. I think there are Latin America's got very different countries within it. In some countries are much further ahead than others. But, thanks, Justin, for the shout out. We are doing things that, at Amplfica, we're doing things to really encourage women by trying to show success stories of other women in the media. So we know the importance of role models. And so when you see, women break barriers and do things that they didn't do traditionally, it helps break those social stereotypes that might be, confining someone to try something new. So I think that all of us, by sharing success stories, is all contributing to change. And things are changing, but they're changing a lot more slowly than what I would like. But that's not just in Mexico and Latin America; it's worldwide.
Absolutely. And then if we would take a look on, if you would be able to share some great success stories of impact investments here in Latin America, are you able to share some of your top favorite, most intriguing cases? In a way, it doesn't need to be in your portfolio, but something that people would not be aware of, like successful, very, very successful impact investments made in Latin America, and why?
Yeah, and what does it mean to be successful as well in this case?
True. Good add-on, Bauti, over there.
That's you've put us on the spot here. I mean, I'll highlight one success case that from Peru. We're not investors, but Creana, which is an ed tech in Peru. It's a great example of a company that's been very successful from a business perspective, raised a Series B, if I'm not mistaken, recently, and has is having an impact in education and in workforce training in a broad swath of society, but with a large chunk being from lower income populations. And I think that's a great example. And I think the point we haven't touched in Creana's example of this is co-investing between impact funds and venture capital funds, kind of traditional venture capital funds. And we in IMPAQTO Capital have co-invested with traditional VC funds and with other impact investors. And Creana is a success case. And I think the other success cases where it's companies that are farther along, that's where you really realize that success case is a company that's been very financially successful, has gotten a good return for their investors, and is generating impact. And that's where it's interesting to see these co-investments between impact funds and mainstream VC funds.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I've got the opportunity, I'm going to talk about a couple of the portfolio companies that I have, and it's still very early stages. And I think, it's too early to say, success, but for me, success means demonstrating, strong financial indicators and tangible impact on either the environment or people's lives. And so, the first example that I would like to use is one of our portfolio companies called Colors. Now, they are doing transportation of people between cities and now most recently within cities in Mexico. The founders, two extraordinary people, Rodrigo and Anka, they're a very highly complementary team. But, you think transportation is something very simple, but 80% of the people who use this kind of transportation are doing it because they've got to go to either some kind of work commitment or family commitment. So they're not doing it because, they're going on holidays. It's something, a very important service. And over 80% of these people do not have their own vehicle, right? So what they have done is, using data analytics, they have optimized routes, which sounds very simple, but if you can optimize the route so that someone can get to their destination an hour more quickly, because rather than using the traditional bus terminals where no one wants to go, they've got alliances with shopping centers and hotels to do virtual stops. That really improves the quality of people's lives because they're not, wasting so much time that they don't need to be, and they can get on with their day, more quickly. But also by making these bus routes more efficient, they reduce the amount of pollution, they reduce the carbon footprint. So, to me, that is what I want to see in a successful investment. It shows, a company that's got strong growth, strong financial indicators, but also has both social impact, and environmental impact. Another example from our portfolio is a company called Vercor, and they have, two excellent founders, Hugo and Valentina, and they are providing credit to the agricultural, farmers. And that is, it's productive credit. So it's credit that allows them to buy fertilizer, it allows them to buy seeds, but it also gives them access, to new technology and farming techniques. So what they've seen is through providing that service, the productivity of the farmers has increased. The yield has increased. They have been able to adopt more sustainable farming practices, and also, a lot of those farmers are very close to the poverty line. So it's having a social and also a positive environmental impact. And, that's still
Yeah.
a very, very early stage at the moment, but, they're showing green shoots in terms of, financial performance. And so, that's what I'm looking for, when when I'm investing. Ideally, if you can have, both that social and environmental impact and those, strong financial returns, that's a winner, every day.
Thanks for sharing on that. And then if we, are you able to share a little bit on the state of impact investing in Latin America in terms of what are the current numbers? What has been going on um, in terms of how much money is coming into the region? There was a World Economic Forum article that was also in the IMPAQTO Capital's website, is that impact investing has grown more than tenfold in a decade in Latin America to $25 billion. And are is there a change on those numbers? How much is, let's say, are you expecting on an annual basis currently in terms of the money are being funneled? I know these are hard questions, but let's say ballpark estimates, so that the audience may have a glimpse. And then a second aspect, a second question over here is that where is this money coming from mainly?
Sure. So, as with any statistics and data, there's different ways of looking at it and different
Of
numbers. So
course.
that 25 billion number from Latin America was from an article that my partner Shell and I wrote for the World Economic Forum a couple of years ago. So that number's grown. I actually think probably the better way to look at it, because that's from a different source, a better way to look at it, the Global Impact Investing Network, which I mentioned, they're the ones who measure the impact investing sector globally. And they just this year said that there's now over $1 trillion in assets in impact globally. And, that's with these requirements of intentionality and measurement, et cetera, that we talked about. And I think they break that down in their latest report. I don't remember, but they do break it down by geography in terms of the percentage. And it would be in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I think that it's now significantly more than that $25 billion. I don't want to say a number that's not right. But probably closer to 50 to $100 billion. I think. Now that's impact investing is includes a very wide range of types of investing. So we're talking about impact venture capital, impact investing in startups, but impact investing includes infrastructure investments.
Yes.
It includes private equity, includes venture capital, it includes real estate and things like affordable housing. And so there's a lot of impact money. And actually, the first wave of impact investing in Latin America was funding microfinance institutions. And that's still a big chunk of that. So just to give the context that we're not just talking about startups when we talk about those numbers, but all that to say, we're seeing a lot of growth in the impact investing sector in Latin America, across the different asset classes. As we open this conversation, talking about how there's more and more funds talking about impact, particularly in venture capital and in the startup world. And so I think that all are positive trends and is something we'll continue to see and will continue to grow in the future. And that's really good because Latin America is not a market where we're competing for deals for the most part among the funds that are there, where there's really a lack of capital, particularly in the earlier stages, where Anna and I are both investing. And so we need more funds that are investing in these companies. We need more funds with an impact focus and more capital to be channeled to these entrepreneurs who are solving big problems.
Yeah. And is there like a ballpark estimate from the total impact investing dollars that are coming into Latin America? How much is in venture, so to startups and technology?
I haven't seen an estimate there. I mean, the estimate from LAFCA is that we're going to close 2023 with somewhere between $4 and $5 billion in total total venture capital in Latin America. But I haven't seen any attempt to quantify how much of that is from impact investors. Remember, there's deals of a company announced around. You have to look at the list of investors because there's often a mix of impact investors and traditional venture capital funds there. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to break it down.
Absolutely. And where is the money then coming from? Let's say your LP pays. Where do they come from? Who is investing in, let's say now, if we narrow it down to venture, venture impact funds in Latin America?
Okay, I'm happy to share a little bit there. And I actually don't know 100% sure of, where your audience is, but I'll just share a bit of my experience. 60% of our investors, actually 70% are from Mexico. 60% of our investors are women, and 70% of our investors are from Mexico. It's very unusual to have such a high percentage of women as investors in a fund. Typically, we've seen other funds where it's 5% or less, but that was something that's very important to us. So as I mentioned, 70% from Mexico, 10% from other parts of Latin America, less than 10% from Europe, and around 12% from the US. And when the interesting thing for me was when I was fundraising, I was very interested to connect more with European sources of capital. And I wasn't very successful at that. I went to a gender lens conference in London, and it was probably the most, disappointing experiences ever, because, it's a long way to go to London from Mexico City, and, it's
Yeah,
tiring.
it is.
Yeah. And actually, no one was interested in talking to me about this, this fund focused on women from Latin America. Everyone was interested in Africa or second, Asia, Southeast Asia. So I thought that was very, very interesting that, and I understand the proximity between, Europe and Africa. I had thought that, for, historical reasons, perhaps there'd be interest from, investors in Spain, but not, or maybe I'm just really bad at fundraising, but I was not able to make those, connections. And, very interesting to see, what people were interested, but I did not get, a strong interest, for Latin America from people in Europe.
And what's the people you were talking in?
Sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the people I was talking to, it was, a conference focused on gender smart investing. So those people were specifically interested in investing, along, focused with gender. So, potentially investing in women, and, all kinds of investors, from institutional investors to, individuals. But, because the location was London, and most of the people came from other parts of Europe, they were pretty much interested in other geographies outside of Latin America.
And then in the US, you were about to say that in the US, did you have a different type of experience or?
What I've seen in the US is that there, given the, tragic events surrounding George Floyd, that's led to a lot more interest in investing in people of color in the United States. And it also led to more interest in investing in other diverse fund managers in the US. And, and that's really, really important, because the amount of capital going to, diverse fund managers in the US is very, very low. So when I was speaking to people, about the potential of investing of an impact fund in Latin America, I would say that, the attention was elsewhere. People wanted to solve problems close to home first, rather than, invest outside of the US. So I just found that was and I can 100% understand, that focus. I'm hoping, going forward, I can find and connect with investors who have some kind of interest in Latin America. Now, we know that in the US, there's a large Latin American diaspora, so people who have a connection, first, second, third generation, who are interested in investing in Latin America. But also, there are a lot of people, from the the US born and bred generations who have a strong connection with Mexico and Latin America too. Like, we know that there are a lot of people with multi-million-dollar houses in Los Cabos and San Miguel and other parts of Latin America. And today, we would love to be able to tap into them as potential investors because, they already have this connection with Mexico. And we've found that to some extent. I had one investor reach out to me. He said, "Oh, look, I've made money in real estate in Mexico. I've seen the situation of women in Mexico, and I'd love to invest in your fund because I want to be part of the change that you're building." So, it's I think that so it's super interesting what we see.
Absolutely. Justin, anything to add over there, like about your LP base? Is it also coming mainly from your host countries or the Andean focus area that you're going through, or is it mainly international capital or outside Latin America?
Yes, I think Anna and I are a lot of census exceptions in this role, but we also raised about 50% of the capital from local investors from the Andean region, a lot from them from Ecuador, and there it's a very different fundraising experience where there's a lot of education needed on how to invest in what is impact investing and and investing in funds and things like that, and that's part of kind of this ecosystem building effort that funds like Anna and ours are trying to do, is build up this LP base locally in Latin America. And it's an important effort. And we also have about 45% of our investors are women as well, which is important to us to have that diversity. Now that the maybe speaking a little more generally, what you see in a lot of cases is a lot of the capital comes from the U.S. and a lot of capital in Latin America and Latin American funds comes from the U.S. And Europe, and it doesn't necessarily have that diversity. But I think it's all part of the development ecosystem, because over the last 5 years or 10 years, or really whatever period you look, there's more and more funds based in Latin America, investing in Latin America. Whereas before there were a lot fewer funds in Latin America, and the money that was coming in from elsewhere. And that's true also on the LP side, where you are having more and more Latin American individuals, family offices, foundations, and other institutions that are interested in startups, interested in impact investing. And so I think one of the advantages of being a first time fund manager, as Anna and I both am, is that it allows you to connect with those communities that might not necessarily have the opportunity to invest in funds or might not be investing in funds otherwise, and to help to build that ecosystem of LPs locally.
Absolutely. Well, Justin and Anna, thank you so much for sharing your views, your experiences about impact investing in Latin America. I personally enjoyed it quite a bit, and I think both of you as well. Thanks for participating today, and I really, really am a big fan of your work, what you're trying to achieve here in Latin America. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's like you're paving the way for the new future. So thanks for participating. Appreciate it a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for the invitation. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. Really enjoyed it.